Good evening and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Tracy, Shilshi, and today we're focusing on President Pranab Mukherjee's just concluded trip to Israel and Palestine. Well, Mukherjee became the first Indian head of state to address the Israeli parliament. He also sent out a strong message against all forms of terrorism, but he did refrain from referring to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict while, of course, addressing the parliament there, though he did talk about it during his speech in Palestine. Well, a lot of factors, of course, there, a lot of developments that took place and helping us assess that visit and also the key highlights and how, of course, relationships have changed in the past few decades. We have in studio this evening former Ambassador Virendra Gupta joining us. We also have Professor Bansidhar Pradhan of the Center for West Asian Studies at JNU. We also have senior journalist Satish sitting right here next to me, and also foreign affairs expert SD Muni joining us as well. Mr. Gupta, if I could come to you first, just talking about this visit specifically, what, according to you, were the highlights really of him visiting Palestine and Israel as well?
Well, the very fact that President visited Israel, this was the first time that a head of a state from India visited Israel. And I would say that that is the climax in the relationship which began in '92. And I was very privileged to have started that relationship in the sense that I established the Indian Embassy. And ever since then, our relationship has grown in every possible area. There is a lot of business cooperation, a lot of cooperation in the defense sector. And this is a culmination of recognition of that relationship.
If I could come to you, Professor Pradhan, you know, his visit, of course, coming at a time when Israel and Palestinian conflict really has seen quite a rise, especially since mid-September. Until today as well, we're hearing reports of how the Israeli-occupied territories, you know, there's a lot of bloodshed going on, of course, there. You know, and talking about how India's stand has been in the 70s regarding the PLO, and of course, eventually later on, and especially the past 2 decades, how the relationship with Israel, of course, has grown. And that, of course, has been a concern for Palestine. Professor Pradhan.
Yeah, you want my opinion? Okay, fine. See, now there is a change in India's policy. I would not say that India has abandoned Palestinian cause, but a certain degree of dilution in our commitment to the Palestinian cause. If you see the president's address in Al-Quds University, now he talked about three dimensions of India's Palestine policy. First is solidarity with the Palestinians, then support to the Palestine cause, then support for the nation building and capacity building. In my opinion, we are more successful in the third element as of now. After '92, we are somehow managing the former two. This is because, and you also talked about the rise in violence. This is probably, this is where the unpredictable of the whole conflict is, because this is where, the Prime Minister's speech in the Knesset is interpreted differently. Some segment of Israeli population, the MPs, they were not happy that this Prime Minister didn't mention even. Even I, as a scholar, would try to find have some reservation about in President Mukherjee's reference that we are opposed to all forms of terrorism. In the context of Israel-Palestine conflict, if you talk about all forms of terrorism, there is every scope for misinterpretation and being misunderstood by the people. And you must understand the protest. That's a very signal that Indian policymakers should take note of. The protest against President's speech in Al-Quds University. What are the students talking about? They were not unhappy, so unhappy with India. The placards say, you need to hear our voice, this young population. And they also said, dear India, boycott Zionism, they are murderers, butchers. The message is very clear for Indian policymakers that yes, you have close ties with Israel. Yes, you have defense, agriculture, and business. Fine. But as far as anti-terror cooperation is concerned, this is a very problem area. We should be very, very careful about that. Let's be very clear about it.
Yes, Professor Muni, if I could come to you. This is, of course, one aspect really that, of course, the Indian media as well, of course, because the government also didn't highlight it, the Indian media as well didn't take it up to a big extent. The very fact that, students were protesting against his, when he made that speech at Al-Quds University. In fact, he had to cut short his trip as well.
That's true.
You know, that in itself is also an indication of the growing resentment, at least among the people, the sentiment really of India's stand that it has been for Israel, you know, looking at that vote also in July that it refrained against Israel. You know, what's your assessment really of the changing dynamics between India and Palestine at this point?
Well, before I come to the changing dynamics, I wonder if this was the best time for the president to visit. And why I say so, because suddenly the violence had escalated there. Now, Pranab Babu is a seasoned statesman. He has tremendous experience of diplomatically handling. And I think he has done his best in the balancing act on both the sides. But I wonder if the MEA should have actually advised him to go at this point of time. Because what he has got in this visit is, he has got honors from both the sides. And he has also got protests from both the sides.
Yes, absolutely.
That is, his speech in the Israeli parliament has also been resented by the Israelis, and his speech in the university has been resented by the students. Now, this is one, you know, which quietly struck me. So far as relations are concerned, there is no denying the fact that Palestine is rich in our past relations. And Israel is going to be rich in our future relations. Because the way we have built up our relations with Israel since 1992, and I would say even before that, not formally, we started it earlier, that we are looking more and more for a much deeper cooperation in technology matters, in defense matters, in agriculture, even in education with Israel. So far as Palestine is concerned, we have more of a sentiment. We have more of an, you know, the gone years ideological commitment. Of course, we have compulsions within our own country in terms of a secular ethos, and therefore we have told the Israelis that we don't like the religious character of a state. We have therefore expressed our opinion, but you know, this delicate act of balancing past with future, past on the one hand, future on the other hand, and at a time when things are not quite good there. I think it's a compliment. I would pay my compliments to the President for handling things the way he has handled. But certainly we could have chosen another
a better time to go and visit both countries. If I could come to you, Mr. Jacob, would you also agree with the fact that this was an ill-timed visit? But you know, what according to you were perhaps the highlights that we could take away from this?
Well, I completely agree with my colleague here that it wasn't the right time to go there. The other thing is this, that we are talking about whether there is a shift in our policy in that part of the world. Obviously, we all know that there is. We are much closer now to Israelis than we ever were. But unfortunately, Palestine is a poor cousin, and the rich cousin is the Israelis. And we will benefit more from the Israelis. There is nothing the Palestinians can offer us. I mean, I'm talking bluntly as a journalist, as an observer. We have as he said, I quite agree with him, we only have a sentimental, emotional relationship with the Palestinians. We all know. Everybody has abandoned them. They want a small state of their own. The Israelis refuse to give back their land. Americans don't back them up. The Russians were doing a little bit, they have gone. Chinese are silent about it. We were.
And the Arab world is divided.
Arab world never uttered a word in favor of the Palestinians against the Israelis.
This is far more important, exactly.
I have never, perhaps the Saddam was the only person in the Middle East who openly, and the Iranians in some way. Otherwise, who cares for the cause of the Palestinians? Even Edward Said, I'm sure you all agree, he lamented the fact that they had been abandoned. It is the gross injustice, what has happened in our world, that the way the Palestinians have been thrown out from their home. So, Mr. Mukherjee goes there. Unfortunately, he is the president. He is not supposed to be a politician anymore. Although he is one of the most experienced, astute politician we have. I have a great regard for his this thing. But as being the head of state, his position today is, so I think, as they say, that he did a good job of balancing it. But I think India has never been a very good. We have never done a proper balancing thing anywhere. We failed everywhere. So this is not the thing. So unfortunately, but it has highlighted the situation in Palestine once again. Unfortunately, the Indian attention has not caught the imagination there. We are more interested in what's going to happen in Bihar rather than Palestine.
Yes, yes, absolutely. If I could come to you now, Professor Pradhan, you know, like we were just talking about the fact that Palestinians, of course, feel, you know, that they've been left alone. No one's really supporting them. But, you know, as far as India is concerned, they were supporting the cause, you know, till about the 70s and the 80s. But they did realize that, you know, they were not perhaps getting as much as they had wanted out of that relationship, supporting as far as support coming in from the Arab nations were concerned, you know, vis-a-vis, let's say, a Kashmir issue. Palestine, in fact, you know, inching more towards Pakistan when it comes to the Kashmir debate. And, you know, this is, of course, something that over the years, India has perhaps realized that closing in on Israel, apart from, like we are being pointed out, you know, being the richer cousin, you know, this is also another grouse that perhaps India carries.
I think there is a wrong reading of the entire Palestinian perception of the Kashmir question. Let me put it very straight. They've never been supporting Pakistan. But let me start with, as you said, Palestine have been abandoned. That is what precisely I want to highlight. India counts more for the Palestinians than any other country now. Because while supporting Palestine is a part of our foreign policy heritage, its values are embedded in that. And especially when whole world is abandoned, the Palestinians are looking India, because they never believed. Please, these financial palliatives don't matter much. You go and give some millions of dollars in budgetary support and build a hospital. These things they can manage without you. Please. Most important is your political support at every international fora. Now it is time for our policymakers to make it very clear. As for the balancing act, you can never balance in an imbalanced conflict. The balance is tilting towards Israel. Very clear about it. And therefore, as long as the Palestinian problem remains unresolved, there will be an element of uneasiness in our relations with Israel. Therefore, it's time for our policymakers to clearly spell out that, yes, Israel should withdraw from West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem and allow the Palestinians to establish an independent state. Why that statement is not coming from India? You are always doubling with the generalities. UN resolution, peace, negotiations with whom? And about my colleagues talked about wrong timing. I'll be slightly disagreeing with that because the visits are planned long before. This is where I said the unpredictability. The situation is so volatile, you can never predict. It started just of 30th September. The visits are planned long back. It's not planned. And my opinion, probably it is a curtain raiser. The MEA people are trying to make it as a curtain raiser for Prime Minister visit. I think now the Prime Minister visit should be very carefully seen. They should be very, very careful. Given the situation, the indication is very enough. I would advise the MEA people not to allow the Prime Minister to go there because it will further complicate the relationship. Because Israel, please remember, at this point of time, Israel needs more India than otherwise. Israel is getting isolated everywhere. It needs India more than India needs Israel. So let's play our cards very well. Whereby we protect our interests, at the same time we protect our values, long cherished values of freedom struggle.
Yes, Mr. Jacob, yes.
Mr. Pradhan, I quite agree with you on one point that I wish President Mukherjee had mentioned about withdrawal, from West Bank and Gaza Strip and all that. He failed to do that. But I think it is not the role of the President of India to talk about it. I wish that the Prime Minister had gone to Israel and Palestine instead of the President. But if he had gone there, then he should have made it very clear that he is not going to visit both of them at the same time. Because you go to both the things, they are quarreling with them, what can you do? But the thing is that as India, you say that we are the only one who have not perhaps abandoned Palestinians completely, but I think in a way we have. Now, do we have the courage to tell the Israelis that, look, we appreciate your cooperation with us, but sorry, you are doing wrong. You have to vacate those things for the Palestinians.
Absolutely,
Can we do that?
asking
But
for.
that is what we were talking
No,
about.
but you
the
see,
precarious situation
what is
that
happening
India
today
stands. Yes.
is illustrative of greater maturity and pragmatism in our policy. Now, there's been a long time that we've been found ourselves bound in, ideological knots. But that has to be also seen along with pursuit of our national interest. I think that is very important, and we're missing the point. National interest is extremely important. Now, it's not a question of balancing. We are not trying to balance between one and the other entity. What we are trying to do is that we are optimizing our relationship with Israel on one hand without losing sight of our core principles. And our core principle is support for the Palestinian cause. And we never fail to articulate that, never fail to mention that, whether it is in Israel or in Palestine. But we are making a very bold statement that our principled stand on Palestine is not going to stop us from advancing our relationship with Israel, which is in our core national interest. And I think that is what has to be understood.
No,
now,
but that
point
is exactly
was made
what,
that about
which is exactly why he didn't.
The timing of the visit.
The president didn't speak in the Israeli parliament about it, but eventually we did see.
He didn't choose to speak in the parliament, but he did talk about it elsewhere.
If you allow me, no one is arguing
about
here.
the timing of the visit. You know what happens when these high-level visits take place? These things are planned well in advance. Now, there is violence, but violence is happening on both sides, and we are not willing to take sides. This is an issue that has to be resolved between the two parties.
Yes.
No, I think, the question of timing. I know that these visits are planned much in advance, but by September beginning, we knew that the violence was escalating, and there could have been 101 diplomatic excuses to delay the visit. This is nothing new. It happens every now and then. Still, why it was not delayed? Largely because, as Mr. Jacob said, Prime Minister has to follow. And he has to follow perhaps only to Israel. Now, this is where, it was necessary to send a message to Palestine that we are with you also. But in the process, the president has been put in a very tight situation, as you said very rightly, that he had to cut short some of his programs, like inauguration of the school. He had to rush back, and he was shown the protest flags and all that, which is not a great glory which India should be, or Indian president should really be facing. Secondly, coming to the ideological and emotional question with Palestine, nobody agrees, or nobody disagrees to the point that on principle India stands by them. But much water has flown down the rivers in so many years. Three things are very important. First, look, as I mentioned earlier, the Arab world, which is the foundation of support for the Palestine, has deeply been divided. Saudi Arabia is talking to Israel. Now, how can India just take a lonely position that no matter what the world does, we stand at the same point? This is not practical, and it doesn't serve any purpose. By simply saying, if you are not practically, physically there is not much which is going to happen. And second is the question of terrorism. At a time when we started supporting Palestine, we were not confronted with terrorism in a manner we are confronted today.
Yes.
And there are forces within Palestine which are taking to terrorist methods. Therefore, President Pranab Mukherjee underlined repeatedly that we don't want a solution based on violence. We want a solution through United Nations. We want a solution through peaceful negotiations. Yes, the Israelis would not succumb. And lastly, rightly so, that we have to make compromises, and we have made compromise. We have distanced ourselves from the Palestinian cause, and we have gone closer to Israel, largely because, as Ambassador Gupta says, in national interest. Now, either you sacrifice national interest and remain on principles, or you make compromises and adjustments in your principles to serve both the sides.
Professor Pradhan, just talking about this current government especially, are we seeing, more of a leaning towards Israel? Is that also another thing that we should be looking at as far as the dynamics are concerned?
Okay, I've been very clear about it. The balance is tilting. Let me also disagree with my previous two speakers about pragmatism and national interest. What is pragmatism? I would argue the other way. Here, pragmatism demands that there is a constant tense in the region. You take steps to resolve that. You are claiming that you are very close to Israel. Then why can't India convince the Israel leadership that this is the main source of conflict in the region, try to resolve it peacefully so that this peace remains our interest best served? Here, I'm not arguing that you are not going to have Israel with technology and agriculture. But point is, let us be very careful. Terrorism. What is your source of terrorism? What is the Israel source of terrorism? I would not be one of those who would call the Palestinians a terrorist movement. That would be misreading of history. That would be total distortion of history. Because you are fighting someone who has occupied your country. POK. These people are fighting against Israel occupation. It's just two different things. Let's not treat both these things the same.
No, the president has said terrorism of all sorts, which implies terrorism by state, by Israel. In fact, in no statement we have ever approved of violence by Israel. This is, we can underline it, but please indicate any such indication where we have gone and said what you are doing is right, what these Palestinian boys are doing is not correct. That's not the question. What we have been underlining in principle, taking global positions, is that we don't want this violence to continue and it should settle down. Even in terms of borders, for instance, President Mukherjee said fixed borders. He has not defined whether you should vacate from these areas or not, because physically you are not able to do anything. I mean, there are so many things which we would want to happen in the world and will not happen.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you just, go on hammering a point beyond a limit. We have done it in principles, and I don't think we have really tried to do anything to give setback to our principled policy so far as Palestine is concerned.
And this is an evolution on a larger issue. For us, India, the larger issue is to create a global construct on terrorism. And which is why we are always saying that we do not support terrorism of any kind, not for any reason.
Yes.
That is our position. So if President were to articulate that position in Palestine and Israel, I think he is not saying anything new. This is what India is articulating at all points of time. And in India's position also there must be an evolution over a period of time. Now that we've had been on the receiving end and we faced the depredations of terrorism ourselves, our position on terrorism has become very inflexible. We do not support terrorism of any kind for whatever reason. That's it, period. That's for us, in my opinion, is a much bigger issue than the Arab-Israeli issue.
All right. Mr. Jacob, any last words you would like to say?
Well,
looking forward to...
the last word is that we should look, Americans. Americans have always supported Israel. In a way, America is like the godfather of Israel, isn't it? But have the Israelis ever listened to America? Ever?
Yep.
So how do we presume that the Israelis are going to listen to us? Who are we?
Absolutely.
When they don't bother about the Americans, how do we presume that they are going to listen to us? So we are just, I think, let us not deceive ourselves. We are not in a position to influence the Israelis. They are not going to stop ill-treating the Palestinians because we are telling them. We, as Ambassador Gupta has very rightly said, we have to be pragmatist. Our interests lay Israel more beneficial than the Palestinians. It is pragmatism. So let's be ruthless about it. It's important for us to cultivate the Israelis. And let's not talk about the moral story of it. Don't get shocked, but I'm very disappointed. I'm not saying that I can change the situation, but I feel utterly helpless that because of the impending or whatever the compulsions we have, we cannot take a very strong stand in favor of Palestine, which is a sorry thing. That's what I feel.
No, I just wanted to add that still we, in terms of principles, we have been reiterating it to the Israelis. That is the reason why President's speech in the parliament did not go very well with many of the Israelis and the media. And they came up against it that you have not criticized that terrorism, you have not criticized that violence, you have not uttered a single word. Yes, we would not utter that single word. Therefore, the message is very clear. And, the success of this kind of balancing lies in the fact that you are either disliked by both or you are liked by both. And I think in this case, the reactions from the two sides very clearly underline that the President has done an excellent job of a very difficult situation.
All right. I think that's the best way to end this debate here. Thank you to all of you for joining me, of course, on this edition of The Big Picture. Of course, the President, like it has been pointed out, it's been a tough visit, of course, for him. It's been a historic one, definitely. It'll be remembered for a lot of good reasons as well. But clearly, the next step is going to be how the Prime Minister, of course, balances the act. And we'll be looking forward to that. That's it on The Big Picture for tonight. Thank you for joining us. The news, of course, continues on RSTV after a bit. Stay with us.